I want to invite up Taylor is going to come and join me. So we're going to grab a couple of stools and we're going to do a couple of cheeky interviews. Who likes an interview? I do. So let's get Taylor a mic. Everybody, welcome Taylor. Does your mic work?
Hello?
Whoop. EJ, you guys can sit if you want, or you can stay. It's up to you. Yeah. Does your mic work?
Yeah.
Great. Cool.
Hi.
Okay, so let's chat a little bit. Just basically what we're going to talk about is this idea of essentially like trusting God with your future and what that looks like. And so that was the idea of doing this today. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Taylor's the best. If you haven't met Taylor, she's just this super smiley, can-do person. She's a part of our team. She helps with our hosting. And she's part of dinner parties, and you're actually like such a legend. And it feels like you've been here forever.
Yeah.
Because you're just that kind of person, but I know that it actually hasn't been that long. Okay, so let's start off. Why don't you introduce yourself to the peeps and let us know like how sort of a little bit of your background with church and the Lord and stuff.
Yeah, so as Channing said, I'm Taylor, and I came to London about 5 or 6 years ago. I wasn't a Christian when I arrived here in London. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't grow up in a Christian family. And I found the Lord I was about 23, 24 when I found the Lord. I had come from a very broken place on the inside. I was partying a lot. I was very different how you just described me, not very smiley at all. Instead, I was, very cynical, actually. I didn't think that there was future in this world. I didn't believe in even love. I didn't believe that existed truly. I thought we just made it up as human beings. But I came to find the Lord coming from that broken place. It's sort of one of those journeys that's hard to put into 2 minutes. I just woke up one Thursday, and for some reason I had this thing on my heart that I wanted to go to church. And I got up that Sunday and I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't belong in church, I'm not the kind of person that goes to church. But I was there, and I couldn't deny the presence of the Lord in that place that day. And I just had this huge revelation of Jesus and who he was, and it just opened my eyes. It was like a colorblind person seeing color for the first time. I just saw the world so differently in just a moment.
Wow, my gosh. That's amazing. Just one Thursday, hey?
Yeah, I remember it being a Thursday. I was just like, I'm going to go to church on Sunday.
Good things always happen on Thursdays, I think.
Must be.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so what does trusting God look like for you?
I think for me it's bringing my whole self to the Lord. It's in everything that I do, whether it's, from my work perspective or who I am to my siblings, and just doing it without fear. I think it's very easy to be timid with God, and I always think about Oliver Twist. I don't know if you've seen that musical, but where he's like, goes up and he's like, please sir, may I have some more? And everyone's like, oh, how dare you? And I think we can be a bit like that with God, but I think he wants us to be a bit more bolder. Like in my house, when I wanted to ask Mum for food, I was like, Mom, I'm hungry. Where's the food at? So I think he wants us to be more like that with him. And so, I think that's what trusting God is for me.
So good. Everybody's nodding. Really, really good. So how does your faith play a role in planning for your future?
I think before I had faith, I didn't have a future. I didn't see a future. I couldn't see it. I felt like every curveball that the world sent my way was my fault because of who I was and the way I was with people and whatnot. But knowing God has made me a dreamer, I guess. I see a future bigger than, I don't know, I can even imagine. And sometimes it's easy to let those thoughts in, who am I to be able to say that I could, I don't know, change an industry. For those of you who don't know, I'm a dance teacher and I've just opened my own business. And I want to change the industry. I want it to be a better place for our young children and everything. And sometimes I'm a nobody. Who am I to do that? But with God, I do feel like unstoppable almost. So it's made me a dreamer.
Amazing. Starting your own business is hard. Does anyone put your hand up if you've ever like run your own business or started something new? Or not that many people, because it's really hard, especially in London.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Okay, last question. Have you had experiences with God sort of in your past or recently where you feel like he's really come through for you and really, sort of along the lines of what we're doing today of bringing those ideas, those hopes, those dreams, those goals to him, where you've really seen the fruit of that in your life?
I mean, definitely. I like I said, I moved here 5 years ago, and I'm sure as most of us in this room are aware, since a lot of us are expats, like dealing with visas and things, I met the Lord here in London, and I just felt like when my visa ended, I can't leave. This is where I need to be. It's changed my life. And I felt like I was supposed to be here, but every door to having, being sponsored or whatnot because of what I do, it just kept being closed. And I kept praying about it. I pray with people in community, and I just felt like the Lord put it on my heart. He's like, you just need to go home. You just need to go home. And I was very sad about it. But I went home it was in December of 2019. And I got there, and my mum was like, we have Italian descent. She said, what about getting your European passport? And I'd looked into it, and everything said it could take up to 2 years, I was like, I don't want to wait that long to get back to London. And she said, just go to the consulate and ask. Bring all the papers we have that we know that you're Italian descent, and just ask. And I got there, and the lady let me in, no appointment, nothing. And she looked over the papers, and then she gave it a stamp, put it to the side. She's like, yep, your passport will be here in 2 weeks. And I'd never been to Italy. I don't speak the language. And then, I got my passport in 2 weeks. I flew back in January 2020, just before COVID and just before Brexit. And I managed to get in on the pre-settled status there just before Brexit. So it was like it was meant to be. And it was 100% God, 100%, yeah.
So cool. Guys, can we give Taylor a hand? Thanks so much. Okay, we're going to do a little tag team with Brian. There you go.
All right, I'm going to welcome Cam up. Cameron. Hey, Cam.
How's it going?
Good, how are you? Good. Just love Cam. He's the coolest. He's the most stylish guy ever.
Oh, I've seen him so Brian, though.
Watch his shoe game. Like, every Sunday, check what kicks he's wearing, because they're always amazing. You're also just a top bloke as well.
Thank you.
How are you? Twinning?
Well, yeah. Not as close as last week. Last week was very similar.
Yeah. Great minds, like I think.
Yeah.
Think alike. Sorry, guys. Bad joke. It's an ad joke. I'm very sorry. Cam, how you doing?
Good.
Tell us about yourself.
So I moved over to London about probably 5 months ago now. I grew up in a Christian household, and I think growing up, it was very much you go to church with your parents, and it's based on your parents' faith. And you get to a certain age where your parents say, you're like 14, 15, you can decide whether you come to church or not. And it was interesting and sort of getting to this stage where I'm like, is God where I want to, be? And making that decision for myself when I realized that, God is where I sort of centered all my faith and everything I base my life on. Yeah.
So cool. And you've come from New Zealand.
Yep.
Cool. And you've been here for 5 months.
Big detail
so
cool.
There. So cool. So what does trusting God look like for you personally?
So for me, trust is very relational. It's like any person that you meet, you have to grow and you have to understand that person to grow and trust. So I think with our Christian faith, it's prayer, worship, reading the Word. And for me, a big part of the growth was in prayer, because the Bible teaches us about giving things to God and laying it down in prayer. And for me, it was always a case of you give to God sometimes and you hear yes or a no, but other times you hear nothing. And I was really impacted one day where I heard a sermon, and the title of the sermon was just "Go Until You Hear a No." And for me, it was a big realization where God gives us free will. We're not robots. We're not doing exactly what is told all the time. We will have things that God will guide us on because He sees everything. but there are parts of our life where we have to make decisions and learn for ourselves.
It's a great word. Really great word, Cam. Powerful. So how does your faith play a role in sort of dreaming, planning for the future?
I think faith is huge, and I think for me, one of the things my mum taught me growing up was the armour of God. In Ephesians, it talks about being a Christian, we wear armour, and there's different parts for different parts of our faith. But one of them is the shield of faith, and it talks about how the shield of faith actually protects us from the arrows of the enemy. So for me in prayer, it is a case of laying things down before God, but understanding that God is protecting us, and our faith is not just believing for something. Our faith is actually what protects us from the unknown. I think for that, for me, I always had a sort of a dream of coming to London for like 10 years. I sort of every year would, around Christmas, which is summertime in New Zealand, lay out before God and go, hey, I feel like I want to go to London. And for year after year, it was a case of praying and something would stop it, like it would be a career opportunity or a relationship thing or something with my family. And then just after lockdown finished, I prayed it again, and excuse me, everything fell into place. I applied for my visa. They said 12 weeks. It took 3. I had friends over here who said, come stay with us till you find a job, and it really was a case of waiting on God's timing, and it just fell into place.
That's so good. Man, you need to be a preacher. I think you got it. That's so cool. Thanks, Cam. And I guess like following that theme, are there any other instances where you've experienced God's goodness as you sort of trusted Him with your dreams and plans?
Yeah, the big one lately was actually just finding a flat. And I think anyone that's talked to me in the last couple of weeks, they've heard this story. I keep telling everyone where coming over, obviously I was staying with my friends who were very nice to me, let me stay with them until I found a job. And it got to the point where I sort of didn't want to be a burden on them anymore. So I started praying every night, God, I need a flat, I need a place of my own. Then eventually I moved into some shared accommodation on Abbey Road under the Baptist church. Still praying, God, I need some help, I need something. And I actually talked to a friend in New Zealand, and he asked me how it was going. I said, struggling to find a flat. It was either a case of too many people going for it, or the cost kept bloating up heaps. And he said, I have a friend in London. Do you want me to ask him? So I talked to this guy. Turns out that guy had actually started advertising that day for a flatmate in London. And the flat is 10 minutes walk from my work, right beside Shoreditch. And the guy's lovely. Everything just panned out, Again, not my timing, God's timing.
So good. Thanks, Cam. Can we give Cam a round of applause? Appreciate it. Ooh. Thanks. We're going to hear from, wasn't that so good? We're going to hear from Jay, the one and the only.
Very quickly
Thanks, Jay.
before we can pray over these wonderful things we want to bring before God. Man, I love hearing testimony so much. It's so encouraging. Man, I want to hear more about Taylor's testimony. Gosh, that sounds like a lot. We're such a church full of expats because guess what I'm going to talk about? The truth is, for me, trusting God is probably not necessarily something that's come overly easy. And I think as I've gotten older, it probably has a lot to do. I am fairly self-sufficient and find it hard asking for help. Yes. Channing knows me fairly well. And so I don't really know what it is. It's probably something I need to talk to a therapist about, Some shame or embarrassment about not knowing everything or being a nuisance to who I'm asking for help of. But I've realized that I've kind of brought that into my relationship with God a little bit. And then coupled with kind of a sense of my very small earthly human needs is nothing compared to, what He can do and what He does do in the world. But I'm getting better at it. So like I said, I'm also going to talk about my move to London. My husband and I, we moved here in January of 2020. Great timing, I know. But we actually decided at the beginning of January 2019 that this was a move that we wanted to do. And I don't really know what it was. I mean, I guess now looking back, it was God, but we just started to feel quite restless in our lives. I'd lost a dear friend fairly tragically, and we needed to sort out our faith thing. For those who have heard my story, Matt and I spent most of our 20s out of the church. We held God kind of at arm's reach until we really needed something, so we'd pray, you know. Great relationship. And so, yeah, beginning of January 2019, we were feeling restless. We wanted to move somewhere, and London was something that had always been on my heart. But I knew that we needed to figure out this faith and this God thing, right? I don't know what it was. Getting older, you start to think about, you know, life. And funnily enough, the more we searched for him, the more we found him. Funny how that is. And I had not done that for a very long time, maybe scared of what that would mean for my life and changes I need to make personally, all that sort of thing. But throughout that year, we just fell so much more in love with him and with his word, and we found ourselves back in a really good church with our closest friends. Life was really good. But we'd still made this decision to move to London, and kind of on the outside, I could imagine my parents looking at me going, you know, they've just got their life back. Why are they going to move to the other side of the world? It's going to mess everything up. But we still had this crazy sense of peace, of God's peace, that what we were doing was the right thing. Even though, you know, we'd got all of our kind of ducks in a row, this move was good. And, you know, I'm a bit of a stressor. Matt will know this, especially when it comes to finances. We'd sold our house, living with my parents. We were moving over here. We resigned from our fairly good jobs, and we had nothing lined up, no flat, nothing. But we still knew that we needed to move. And so we arrived here the 24th of January 2020. We got our flat 5 days before we flew. We're moving with dogs too, so it's very stressful. We had no jobs lined up, but in the first week that we were here, we were interviewed and we had job offers by the end of that week. I think I had 2. It was ridiculous. But more importantly than that, we knew that we needed to find a church. We knew that that was going to be important. And we had a pretty big list of what we wanted. You know, we wanted good preaching, we wanted great worship, we wanted people our age that we could become really good friends with. We wanted it to be established but small enough that we could get involved and not get lost in the back. And a church that kind of walks the walk that we were looking for. So we'd gone to 2 other churches. They weren't right for us. We kind of put off going to C3 because, you know, the train line was bad or something from where we were. 2 weeks before lockdown, we found C3. And here we are 3 years later, and I'm preaching. You know, Matt and I, we have the incredible privilege of running beyond here. Through coming to C3, Matt's found like his dream job working for A21. He wanted to shift into charity work, and all I wanted was to move to London. That's how good God is when you bring your small thing. It doesn't seem like God wants me to move to London. That's not something I thought of. But when you bring it to him, he's just going to make it so much more. And that's the importance of putting those things on a card today. I mean, the reality is, even if you don't put on the card, he actually knows. He's already working for it. And so in the same way that we need to trust him, he's trusting us to ask. You know, there's so many verses in the Bible that talk about asking, taking that step. You have to engage with him because I promise you, he is doing so many things. He's lining up so many things for your life, so much bigger than you will ever imagine, but he just needs you to engage in it. And so in the same way that he is that big, he's also that small. He is in it all. He wants to know all the small things, the fears, the disappointments, the hopes, the crazy things that you don't tell anyone about, those crazy dreams. Because I'd almost argue that those small things that you think about, that you're passionate about, he's put there in you to begin with. He wants that for you. He wants you to chase it. So we're going to worship. I'm going to just pray for the next part of our service. So we're going to bring our cards up and pray. Chan will get up and explain that. But whatever it is that you're thinking about, write it down. Big or small, hopes or wants, fears or disappointments, because he wants it all.
Guys, can we thank Jay? So why don't we stand, and if I can invite Seb and EJ, Brian and myself, and the team's just going to lead us in worship, and when you feel ready, come down with your card. We're not going to look at what you've written on the card. You can fold it, that's not what we're going to do. So when you feel comfortable, we'd love it. We would love to pray for every person in this room if you feel comfortable. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. If you want to come and find one of us afterwards to pray with you, that's also absolutely fine. So we're just going to close the online service, I believe, just so that we've got a bit of privacy. And thank you so much if you've joined us online. And if you want to if you're not here today, but you want us to pray with you next week, we can do that as well. So let's worship together and then just start to come down and we'll pray. Does that sound all right? Cool.